let's get into some spray painting now. Okay, so first things first, you got your can and your cap situation. What if one of your caps is clogged and you need to replace it? Well, that's why you got to buy a backup pack of caps, because these are the things that clog the most, the caps. The cans themselves don't usually go bad. It's just that after like one-time use and sitting for too long, or a couple of times, they get clogged up and you got to change it out. I often like to even stick with one cap throughout a session, just because I know I'm going to like keep using that. So when you are putting a new cap on, just make sure that when you are doing that, that you don't have the nozzle pointing towards your face, okay? You want to be putting it on with it facing down. You just give it a little twist, and then you can just give a little like test spray on the side. Right now, this hasn't been sprayed in a while, so it has water in the beginning, and I just got to kind of lightly give it that test, okay? You can test out on the sides, you know, or on the board. It doesn't really matter. Again, this is all about building up texture, so spraying some color on the board is good. Second thing, and this is one of the rules I tell students more than anything else, don't overspray in an area. So for instance, if I were to overspray here, this puddles up, gets very wet, and yes, I can make it drip a little, but it's gonna take a long time for this to dry, okay? This stuff is water-based, and it doesn't dry as quickly as regular spray paint, and those are some things to really keep in mind. So when I tell students to work, you're gonna be working very lightly. I tell them quick, light sprays, barely touch it, right? This takes a little bit of getting used to. You gotta find out the right pressure for the spray paint, but in general, you don't wanna spray too heavy. You just want nice, light sprays, okay? So for instance, if I were to switch to a darker blue now, and I'm gonna do, let's say I'm gonna do a part of a circle up in this corner. I'm gonna grab a darker blue color. I just mist it over that. Really nice and light. That's about as heavy as I want to get. Students and people mostly think that that's not going to cover very well, but it's shocking really how much a little can do with just really light sprays. And again, one of the purposes of all of this work right now is to build up textures and layers. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, one last thing. I often tell students not to do this as well. Don't spray the whole thing with one color. They like to do that with black and white, and I'm like, we can just use some regular paint for that. This stuff isn't cheap, and again, this is about building up layers, so everything you really spray down here in the beginning isn't gonna really show up. I don't mind if you mist some colors, and that's a great way to start getting used to the process and the feel of spray painting. Again, really nice light sprays kind of across the area. Now I can go to, let's say, a circle stencil, and I'm just gonna put it right here, and then I can put some nice light sprays over that, okay? You can also, while that's on there, put another piece over it if you wanted to. Maybe let's put this one inside a little bit. Let's switch to, let's use a yellow there, just kind of like lighten that up. And again, notice you can get like lighter in some areas to do a little bit of a fade, right? So let's take that off and see what that looks like. And this is the process, right? Students are building up layers. They are kind of playing around with these textures. Again, they can kind of do, you know, light shades in a different area, right? But they are working lightly over time, building up layers of color and patterns. You know, and again, like you can just kind of spray in the background every once in a while if you want. Sometimes you can come at it on an angle and it kind of just fades a little bit more naturally as it goes across. All the cans are gonna have a little different elements to them, especially with the caps. They might spray differently, so be aware of that. But again, this is the process. You're building up layers of color and shapes and textures. Let's get another one going on in here. I'm gonna put some octagon shapes. Let's switch to a purple. So again, the process is students are kind of, you know, going through all these stencils. They're just experimenting, playing around with these colors, and they're lightly spraying these colors down. I can't preface enough how important it is to be light. This cap wasn't working, so I'm gonna put the cap on, but of course I don't wanna do it with that facing forward. I wanna do with it facing down. We don't want students spray painting their eyes. Give it a good shake, and there we go. We can kind of mist that in there, right? So really nice light sprays. The other thing that's really important about these nice light sprays is that it's dry. It's a little sticky to the touch in some areas, but in general, it's dry. If I were to take another stencil and put it over this, if it was all wet, the paper of the stencil would get stuck on that, right? It would pull off a lot of stuff, which could create some cool textures, but it's also a lot more likely to ruin the stencil itself. So I'm gonna kind of get in really quick here with some layers. We'll do some time-lapse video of this process, but this is basically the idea. I'm just gonna keep layering different stencils until I kind of get to something I like. Maybe I end up with a color scheme that I like as well. So let's do a time-lapse and get a little bit further along. Okay, let's take a little pause right there. I want to bring something up. So you can also use like ripped paper to kind of create some cool textures. So I keep a lot of different shapes of rips around. This one has like tons of rips all over it, going in different directions. But these are kind of cool, and you can kind of make nice, interesting textures with them. So let me just show you that really quickly around that, and then you'll see like you kind of get these like rips textures. Here, let's come at this from the side a little bit because I want it to show up a little bit more on that edge. This is actually one of my favorite colors. It's a neon pink. I believe it is called fuchsia. I think it's fluorescent fuchsia of the MTN water-based stuff. I just love the way that it kind of like layers over other things. It doesn't usually show all the way through, but I love the kind of glow that it brings to the pieces. So again, this is kind of the idea, right? You're just working, you're building up layers. The kids are having fun. They're just playing around with this. Eventually, you know, they end up with something that is really well covered in a very short period of time, and they can maybe start to work it towards a specific feel. Now, for the graffiti piece, they'll be thinking about, okay, where am I going to be putting my graffiti? I want to think about that space around it. If it's more for another stencil piece, like for instance, if I was going to put like a Batman in here, perhaps I would go, you know, vertical with it and quickly grab a Batman stencil because I happen to have one of those nearby. So this is in my graphic design classes. The students make stencils like this through Photoshop or Illustrator, and then we actually have them cut out in our maker's space, so they don't actually have to do the cutting themselves. And we do it on like a kind of a, you know, a thin Mylar that works really well. It stays together. I would be thinking about the fact that like I'm going to spray this down in this area. So one of the first things that I might do is I'm going to think about like, do I want these to be the darks or the lights? And I could go either way with it. But I want to kind of like create like a little bit of a fade in the background of where that's going to go. So for instance, I'll take some yellow here. Sometimes I like to do this really quick, is just do a very light example of it, so I know kind of in the general area of where it's gonna be. And then I can just kind of like, I'm gonna come around it and like, it's like ghosting. I'm gonna ghost some space around it. And then, you know, might need to give it a sec to dry, but because you don't want to put stencils on wet stuff. And then I'm going to come and layer it in right there where I had it last time. And I'm going to grab a black can of paint and spray that in. And then you could see what that looks like. And the reason why we put that yellow on first is it helps really create the contrast between the background and the foreground. You can still see a lot of the textures, and you could even go a little heavier with that if you wanted to. But the idea is that the stencil pops out of the middle, and that's why you're kind of like doing it that way, okay? So if I were to be working on the graffiti piece, I would then just kind of like think about the fact that my graffiti might be going across here, and I want to work in this space to kind of make that pop out. You can always keep going over this. So you could say like, oh, I don't like the way the bottom looks over here. I'm going to do something with it. You know, perhaps I even want to just like fade a little bit of black down there, because if I'm going with this Batman stencil, it works really well that way. So that's the process in a nutshell. Thanks for watching. Let's take a quick look at my storage situation for this stuff. If you get enough into it, you're gonna be collecting a lot of stencils. It's a good idea to keep them organized so that students can find them. So I have different drawers labeled for different types of stencils. So I have like your various shapes and whatnot in here. So there's just like all kinds of different shapes. I have a lot of circles. Those are really, you know, popular. So different size circles. You know, there's a bigger circle under here somewhere, right? Like that. And again, I only want to be putting dry stuff in here. And you can also do like the negative versions, because you can spray around this to create the opposite result. Making planets is really big among the students, and it's helpful to have something like this to work from. Also, I want to show you, I also keep a mat board like back there after a few layers so that they're easier to kind of like take out as one group, right? And so I have another layer under that. So you want your mat board to be able to carry them, and it's a nice thing to separate them every once in a while. But, you know, I have different types of, you know, stars, lines, rips, and then in the bottom, I keep a lot of the stencils that students have made over the years, so they could like use those again or in backgrounds. You know, they're just nice to keep. So that is my storage space.